Hello everyone. Today, the sand is warm beneath your feet and the air smells faintly of date palms and distant smoke. The Nile murmurs in the background, soft and eternal, while a breeze, barely more than a sigh, rustles the linen cloth of your tunic. You are not yet a scribe, not yet. For now, you're simply a child, small, brown-skinned, with hair cropped close and eyes wide open to the mysteries of a world older than memory. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time is it. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. So dim the lights, settle in, and let's return together to the quiet where your story begins. You were born at dawn, or so your mother tells you. Just as the sky shifted from indigo to gold, and the first ibis of the day lifted its wings along the reeds of the Nile. She swears the moment you arrived, the village dogs stopped barking. That the date palms outside your family's house tilted just slightly, as if to greet you. That the air went still for a breath, as if listening. You believe her. Not because you remember it, of course you don't, but because that kind of story is the first kind you ever knew. The kind told not for truth, but for meaning. And in a land where the gods walk behind curtains of sunlight and shadow, meaning is more important than fact. You are the third son of a fisherman who rarely speaks and a woman who sings to herself while sweeping. Your family lives in a house made of sun-dried mud brick, its roof flat, its windows small and shaded with woven reed mats. A clay pot of water rests near the entrance, always cool in the shade. The walls are decorated with handprints from when you and your brothers were smaller. A gallery of time, slowly fading in the desert air. No one expected much of you. Not because they thought less of you, but because life here doesn't ask for much beyond survival. You are to fetch water, gather dung for fuel, and, if you're lucky, learn to weave or fish. These are the rhythms handed down from parent to child, from scribe to scroll, from god to priest, and yet, you never quite settled into that rhythm. While other children chased goats or threw pebbles into the irrigation canal, you found yourself drawn to different things. The way shadows shifted along the temple walls at dusk, the loops of thread in your mother's embroidery, the slow, deliberate motion of the priest as he traced signs into the sand. You didn't have a name for what stirred in you when you watched those movements, but it was real. It was hunger. Your first memory of writing isn't of ink or parchment. It's of a bird. A hoopoe, specifically, the kind with a crown of feathers like a fan of burnt sienna and coal. It landed near you while you sat on the edge of a water jar, its little head cocked, its feet resting on cracked stone. You stared. It stared back. Then it tilted its beak and traced a circle in the dust with one claw. You mimicked it. A simple spiral, a line into a loop. That was the first time you felt the sensation, the click inside your chest when one shape carried more than one meaning. That day, you drew spirals in the dirt until your fingers bled. Your mother was the first to notice. She didn't read, but she listened well. Her father had been a grain measurer once, and though the skill had not passed to her, the respect for words had. She began to set aside shards of broken pottery for you. Ostraca, they were called. She'd give you a piece and say, "Draw the day." So you did. A fishtail on market day, a sun disk when the air was too hot to think. The side profile of her face when she didn't realize you were watching. One day, she pressed a hand to your hair and whispered, "You don't look with your eyes. You look with your thinking." You didn't know what she meant, but you remember feeling taller when she said it. In the early mornings, you crept toward the temple courtyard, where the priests poured water on stone to cool the floor before sunrise. You weren't supposed to be there. Children weren't allowed past the threshold unless their families paid offering or carried a burden. But you weren't there to steal. You were there to watch. And watch you did. The tall priest with a shaved head who moved like a heron. The acolytes who scrubbed altars in silence. The scribes, gods above, the scribes, who walked like they were carrying invisible things, always leaning slightly to one side, as if protecting something precious on a shoulder no one could see. One of them noticed you, not immediately, not kindly. You had mimicked his walk once just for fun. He caught your eye, frowned, then motioned you closer. You almost ran, but you didn't. You stepped forward, your feet heavy with heat and fear. He didn't speak. He just handed you a piece of bark with a series of glyphs burned into it. You held it like it was fire. That night, you traced the symbols onto your skin. One line on your palm, another on your wrist, a curve on your forearm. Your body became your parchment. The next morning, you found him again. And this time, when he motioned, you offered your arm. He looked. Then, only then, did he smile. It was the smallest smile you'd ever seen, but it stayed with you for days. When the offer came, a place at the school, it didn't arrive with trumpets, no parchment, no ceremony, just the priest at your family's door, nodding once, saying your name. Your father didn't argue. He didn't embrace you either. He just handed you a rope belt and told you not to waste their patience. Your mother gave you her sash, the one she wore during childbirth, and tied it around your waist. She didn't say goodbye. She just kissed your cheek and whispered, "Remember what you see." You nodded, and you walked. The walk to the house of life took 2 days. You rode a donkey for part of it, carried a basket of bread and dried fish, slept under a tree that hummed with insects. At dawn on the second day, the walls of the temple came into view, pale as bone, wide as a dream. The priest didn't speak, just motioned forward. You stepped into the shadow of the stone arch, and the heat of the world vanished. Inside, it was cool, silent, scented with ink and crushed lilies. You stopped breathing without meaning to. The priest whispered, "Don't look at the statues. Look at the dust. That's where knowledge hides." You didn't understand, but you lowered your gaze, and the dust was alive. Tiny footprints, fallen bristles, a splash of ink, a mark from a sandal, stories, all around you, waiting to be written. And so, you began. You sleep on a woven mat in a room that echoes, not from noise, no one dares speak above a whisper here, but from the sheer emptiness of it, just stone, breath, and the soft sound of shifting limbs in the dark. 10 other novices lie around you. Some breathe deeply, already asleep. Others stare at the ceiling like you do, eyes tracing invisible patterns in the air. You don't know their names yet. That will come. For now, you are all just bodies learning to be minds. The mornings arrive without warning. No rooster crows, no sun through windows. There are no windows here, only slits in the wall high above, where light drips in like liquid gold. When it touches your face, you rise. Not because you're rested, you're not, but because if you don't, you'll miss your chance to wash before the water grows warm from the heat of the day. You stand. Your joints ache. You're too young for your body to creak, but it does anyway. And when your feet touch the cool floor, the sensation shoots straight to your spine. It's your second day here. You already feel older. The first lessons are not with ink, not yet. First comes order. Your instructor is a man whose name you do not yet know because he hasn't offered it, and no one dares ask. He moves like the shadow of a hawk. Fast, silent, impossible to predict. He doesn't teach with words. He teaches with gestures. If you sit wrong, a flick of his fingers. If you speak out of turn, a glance that turns your breath to stone. You learn how to fold your legs properly, how to hold your back straight for hours, how to keep your fingers from twitching, even when the itch to scratch your nose is unbearable. The temple doesn't want scribes who can write. It wants scribes who can endure. When writing finally comes, it does so with surprising gentleness. You are handed a shard of pottery, not a scroll, not even bark, just a broken piece of someone's discarded bowl. Your task, Copy a single glyph. The brush is heavy at first, or maybe your hand is too light. Either way, your lines wobble. The ink pools at the tip. You smear it. You expect punishment. Instead, your instructor simply replaces the shard with another. No words, just another chance, and another, until your hand steadies. Not perfectly, but enough. You learn the glyph for life before anything else. It feels symbolic. A loop atop a cross, the ankh. You copy it 100 times, each one a little straighter, a little clearer. You whisper its name with each stroke. Ankh. By the 50th time, the word stops meaning anything. By the 100th, it means everything. There are chants too. You do not learn them from a scroll, but from repetition. Every morning, great is Thoth, who weighs the tongue and measures the silence. Every evening, let my hand be steady. Let my breath be still. Let my memory be a door. The other novices chant with you. Not loud, never loud. But the sound hums in the stone, a chorus of becoming. Some days, you are assigned to ink mixing. Red for warnings, black for everything else. You crush soot with a round stone, add gum and water, stir until your fingers cramp. The smell clings to your skin, burnt, bitter, sacred. One night, while washing your hands, you catch your reflection in the water bowl. Your fingers are black to the knuckle. You smile, not because it's clean, but because it means you've touched the tools of the scribes, even if only to make the ink, not use it. Yet, you meet Hekanak a few weeks in. He's 2 years older, taller, sharper around the eyes. He doesn't speak unless necessary. But one evening, you both reach for the same shard. He lets go first, sits beside you, says nothing for hours. Then, just before sleep, he mutters, "Your loops are too wide, but your balance is good." It's the first compliment you've received since arriving. You nod once, and from that day forward, he becomes your silent twin. Together, you practice long after others rest. He sketches birds in the dirt with a reed. You practice the word for bread until your wrist aches. Neither of you needs to speak. The glyphs are conversation enough. Your instructors begin to call you by your name, not with affection, but with recognition. You are no longer just a body in training. You are a novice with potential. They assign you longer texts to copy, wisdom hymns, temple inventories, even parts of funerary spells. You don't understand them all, but you feel their weight. Each word a stone in the foundation of your future. Each line a brick in the house of your becoming. You copy the name of a god for the first time, not in practice, but in service. The glyphs must be flawless. Any flaw is disrespect. Any error, an insult. You hold your breath as you write. The ink flows. The line curves. The god's name settles into place. And the air feels different. Not colder, not warmer. Just aware, as if something unseen has nodded in approval. You do not tell anyone what you felt, but that night you sleep without dreams and wake without fear. Your days blend together. Ink, silence, posture, copying. Meals are sparse, sleep is shorter than you need, but your body adjusts, your mind sharpens, your fingers learn the rhythm of the brush. The way a slight tremor can alter the entire tone of a line. You write silence so many times, it becomes music. You write truth so carefully, it becomes prayer. You write death once, and your hand refuses to tremble. Because here, death is not an end. It is a passage, and you are learning to write the map. One evening, as the sky outside shifts from gold to deep lapis, your instructor hands you a new assignment, a birth record, simple, clean, 5 lines. You hesitate, because this is real, because someone's life begins with your hand. You write the date, the name of the mother, the midwife, the weight of the child, the offering left at the temple. And then, you add the name, in the cleanest glyphs you've ever made. You lay the brush down. Exhale. And for the first time in your life, you understand what it means to hold history. Not to watch it, not to learn it, but to shape it. The house of life is not kind, but it is sacred. And you are becoming worthy of it. Not because of talent, but because you show up. Because your lines grow steadier. Because your silence grows deeper. Because your brush grows lighter. And your meaning heavier. The world outside continues to spin. The river continues to rise and fall. But here, in this quiet hall of dust and ink, you are finding your place, one glyph at a time. The weeks blur like ink in a flood. Time loses its edges, as if every sunrise and sunset were dipped in the same brushstroke. You no longer count days. You count scrolls, strokes, glyphs, errors, corrections, nods from instructors. Moments when silence feels like approval. And then one morning you wake before the others, not from duty, but because your body, now shaped by habit, knows it is time. You sit up slowly, stretch your legs, and trace a single ankh in the dust near your cot. Not for anyone else to see, just for yourself, to mark the fact that you are still here. You slip into your robe and step into the stone corridor. It is still dark, cool. The air tastes of ash and something sweet. Oil lamps recently snuffed out, perhaps. Or the memory of incense. You walk barefoot toward the scriptorium, the scroll room. Today, you've been told, you will enter the Per Ankh, the true house of life. Until now, you've trained in outer chambers, practice rooms, stone courtyards. But the house of life proper is different. Fewer enter, fewer still leave unchanged. It is not just a place of study, it is a place of transformation. The scribe who greets you at the entrance is older than the others. Not in body, his skin is taut, his posture straight, but in something else. In silence, perhaps. In the way he carries himself, as though his thoughts are layered scrolls, each one more guarded than the last. He doesn't speak your name. He doesn't ask questions. He only gestures for you to follow. You pass through 3 archways, each narrower than the last. The air grows cooler. The walls closer. Finally, the corridor opens into a round room lit by a single, high opening in the ceiling, a circle of sunlight like the eye of Ra watching. There are no windows, no decorations, just a low table in the center. And around it, scrolls, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, some sealed, some frayed at the edges, some so ancient their ink has faded into ghost scratchings. The older scribe sits. You stand. He opens a scroll, not a long one, a funeral register. "Copy this," he says. His voice is soft, yet absolute. You bow and begin. The scroll lists the names of the dead from a small village. Not noble names, not wealthy families, just fishermen, weavers, servants, midwives. Their years of death, their offerings. A line or two about their virtues, or lack thereof. You copy the first name. Ket, son of Hui. Died in the 6th year of the flood. Left 2 baskets of grain. No debts. The ink flows easily. Your hand is steady. You check every glyph against the original. You correct your spacing. You breathe with each line, not because anyone is watching, but because you are. By the 5th name, your rhythm settles. By the 10th, you forget your fear. By the 15th, you forget your hunger. And by the end, you are no longer copying. You are witnessing. Each name becomes a person. Each line, a life. Each final glyph, a door closing gently. The old scribe returns. He takes your scroll, says nothing, but he does not discard it. He places it in a reed basket marked with ochre dye, and that is how you know it will be kept, used, filed, and perhaps read again one day. You are now part of the record. You leave the Per Ankh not as a novice, but as someone the world might one day quote. Later that week, you are introduced to Aine, She is one of only 3 women scribes in your temple complex. She is stern, quiet, and watches you like a cat watches a flame. You are assigned to her for a season, one full moon to the next. Her specialty, meaning. You've learned to form the glyphs. She will teach you what they contain. The eye, she says, drawing the familiar almond shape with a stroke of red ink, can mean watching, protection, light, or judgment, but only in context. She writes it again, this time flanked by a jackal and a scale. What does it mean now? She asks. You hesitate. Finally, you answer, truth. She nods. You begin to see. Aina gives you fragments of damaged scrolls to study. Your job is to fill in the missing glyphs, not with guesses, but with understanding. A sentence begins, may your name be, then a tear, a blank, you must choose. Spoken forever, or forgotten by none, or written in the halls of the West. Each choice is correct, but only one is true. You choose spoken forever. Aine looks at you for a long time, then marks the scroll with a blue dot. That's her signal for acceptable. She never uses gold dots. You aren't even sure if they exist. You begin to walk differently now, not with pride, but with awareness. You carry knowledge the way one carries water, carefully, constantly, aware of every step. Others begin to ask you for help. You don't always answer, not because you're unkind, but because you've learned that silence too is a kind of teaching. One afternoon, you are called into the archivum, a room deeper in the temple. Fewer novices allowed. It smells like old ink and resin. The head archivist, a man with one milky eye and a voice like paper tearing, hands you a box. Inside, pieces of correspondence from the reign of a forgotten king. Your task? Restore what you can. Translate. Catalogue. You spend hours squinting over faded strokes, filling gaps with breath and memory. One letter stands out. To the overseer of granaries, from the mouth of the one who serves Thoth. The records do not match. 5 sacks are missing. If this is deception, let the ink reveal it. You feel a chill, because somewhere, a scribe once wrote this in anger, or fear, or both. And now, centuries later, you hold his thoughts, still sharp, still urgent. Ink outlives anger, outlives deception, outlives flesh. You start to dream of papyrus fields, endless rows of green stalks swaying under a copper sun. In your dream, you walk through them, brush in hand. Each leaf whispers a name. You do not write them. You listen, and in the morning, you remember none of the names, only the sound. Aina assigns you a ritual task, to prepare a scroll of offerings for the festival of Opet. It will be read aloud in public. You write slowly, clearly. You clean your brush after every third glyph. You rewrite one line 5 times until the curve of the bread glyph feels full, not rushed. When you finish, you wait for judgment. Aine reads it once, then again, then rolls it and seals it. No words, but her hands are steady. That's enough. The day of the festival arrives. You wear your cleanest robe. The sun is merciless, but the streets are alive. Flutes, tambourines, incense curling like smoke from a mouth. The priests march, children scatter petals, and then, in the middle of the procession, your scroll is read. Not your name, never your name, but your words. And as the voice rings out, something inside you expands. Not ego, not ambition. Something softer, like dusk, or breath after crying. You are here, and your hand is heard. That night you walk alone to the edge of the temple grounds. The Nile glows under the moon. You kneel. You press your palm to the ground and whisper, "Let my lines endure." You do not know to whom you speak, the gods, the dead, your future self. But the silence that follows feels like a response, and that's enough. you begin to understand that the body must be trained just as much as the mind, that knowledge, without endurance, crumbles, and that the life of a scribe, while wrapped in the reverence of temples and the praise of priests, is built on long hours of stillness, precision, and pain. The first to go is the softness in your legs. Days of sitting cross-legged on stone or woven reed mat stiffen your hips until rising becomes a calculation. You learn to stretch silently in the early dark, fingers reaching for toes, shoulders rotating slowly. You never complain. No one does. Complaining is for those with choices. You, like the others, have given yours away. Your hands follow. What began as simple stiffness becomes ache, then tremor, then a dull, relentless throb just below the thumb, where the reed rests most often. By now, your brush is an extension of your body. When you sleep, you still feel it in your palm. Some nights, you wake and reach for it blindly, confused by its absence. To soothe the pain, you are taught a ritual. Warm sand wrapped in linen, pressed to the base of the wrist after a day's work. It helps, slightly. What helps more is knowing everyone else is doing it too. There is comfort in silent suffering, in shared sacrifice, in the knowledge that these aches are proof of your training, your belonging, your future. But even as your body rebels, your mind blossoms. Glyphs that once seemed impossible now arrange themselves before you. You no longer sound out each word. You see meaning at a glance, your eyes trained to recognize not only form, but rhythm. You begin to read aloud with fluency. You begin to translate texts without trembling. One morning, your instructor places an old scroll before you and says simply, "This was written in the time of Akhenaten. Can you understand it?" You nod, though your stomach tightens. The glyphs are more angular, the style looser. You begin reading. Stumble once, correct yourself. By the second paragraph, you are breathing evenly again. By the end, your voice is steady. Your instructor nods once, then replaces the scroll. Nothing more. But you feel it, a shift, like the air pressing differently against your skin. You are no longer just repeating. You are interpreting. Your tasks grow harder. You are asked to organize lists, not merely copy them. To correct errors in old documents, rephrase hymns to fit modern dialects, reformat temple inventories into scrolls easier to store. This is when you learn the truth. Scribes are not just preservers. They are editors of reality. If a record is unclear, you clarify. If a date is missing, you estimate. If a name is incomplete, you reconstruct it based on lineage and context. You do this with care, reverence, humility, but also with certainty. Because once your brush touches the papyrus, the correction becomes the truth. There is no version beneath yours, only the one you leave behind. Your instructors begin assigning you to double work. By day, you train with texts. By night, you assist in administrative recordings, census counts, grain tallies, marriage contracts. These are not sacred writings, but they are just as important, because without them, temples fall, families feud, crops go unaccounted. You learn to write fast, neatly. You develop a shorthand for common phrases. You memorize weights and conversions. You learn to identify when a measurement has been exaggerated, often by those trying to avoid taxes or curry favor. Your job is not to accuse. Your job is to correct quietly, to write what should have been, not what was claimed, and to do so with a calm hand. Your world contracts and expands at the same time. You spend less time with other novices, more time with records, scrolls, tools. You begin to feel less like a student and more like a part of the building itself, as if should you vanish, a corner of the temple might crack. But when you do speak to others, your words carry weight. One evening, a younger novice asks you what the glyph for balance truly means. You sit with him, draw it in the dust, explain how the scale represents not only legal fairness, but also the equilibrium between the world of the living and the world of the dead. It's not just justice, you say. It's harmony. He nods slowly. You see the understanding in his eyes, and in that moment, you realize something unexpected. You enjoy teaching, not because it makes you feel important, but because it makes the knowledge more real. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, you wonder what your life would have been had you not been chosen. Would you be bending over fields, carrying water, weaving linen? Would you feel this same kind of fulfillment, this ache, this certainty? You try to imagine it. But the vision refuses to form, because this, the ink, the scroll, the hush of stone, is your life now. Everything else is a ghost that never was. The body adjusts. Eventually, the pain dulls, the strength grows. Your posture becomes second nature. Your grip, firm. You can now write for hours without cramping. You can sit without shifting. You can breathe through distraction, fatigue, hunger. And you begin to recognize the physical endurance for what it truly is. A doorway to mental clarity, to creative stillness, to spiritual resonance. Pain was never the enemy. It was the gatekeeper. And you have passed through. One morning, you are summoned by Aine. She hands you a blank scroll and says, "Translate this prayer into the vernacular." You nod. The scroll is long, and the dialect old. But you work slowly, carefully. By nightfall, it's done. You hand it to her. She reads it, word by word, then looks up and says, "You made a choice here." You nod. Yes. The word for light in this context could also mean clarity, but I used guidance. She watches you, then says, "Good," and walks away. 2 days later, you see your translation being read in the lower temple. No one knows you wrote it, but you do. And as the words echo, you feel something solid settle inside your chest. You are no longer being taught. You are being trusted. Late one night, as you walk through the courtyard under a moon the color of pearl, you pass Menrene, the old instructor who rarely speaks. He stops, looks at you, then says, in a voice softer than the rustle of parchment, "Your lines have weight now." You bow, stunned, but he's already walking away. The compliment hovers in the air like incense. You carry it for days. You don't realize how much you've changed until one day, a child, newly arrived, eyes wide, limbs too long, stares at you from across the practice chamber. You recognize the fear, the confusion, the hunger. You walk over, kneel, offer him your brush. He hesitates, then takes it. Your fingers meet for a moment, and you smile. Not because you see yourself in him, but because you see the path behind you, and how far you've come. You are still a novice, still learning, still humbled by the vastness of knowledge, the depth of history, the silence of the gods. But you no longer question your place. You no longer doubt your purpose. You no longer flinch when the ink bleeds. You simply blot it, correct, continue. Because your body, though weary, and your mind, though stretched, now move as one, together, forward, toward the next scroll, and the next truth. The scroll lies before you, blank, unmarred, impossibly smooth. It smells faintly of pressed reeds, sun-dried and scraped, ready to receive the weight of your hand. You've held scrolls before. You've practiced on fragments, on shards, on reused sheets with faded lines to guide you. But this one is new, official, commissioned. It bears the mark of the temple. This is no exercise. This is your first real assignment, and the moment is heavier than you expected. It is not a grand task. A small registry, they say. A receipt, technically. A matter of record, vessels of oil delivered from one village to another, under the authority of the temple. The ink will not praise the gods, nor speak to the dead. It will not promise eternal life. It will simply confirm a transaction. But even that has weight, because once written and sealed, it becomes the truth. You do not choose your tools, they are given to you. A scroll of fresh papyrus, just long enough for 4 columns of writing. A brush with fine bristles, not yet broken in. 2 pots of ink, 1 red, 1 black. A template to follow, handwritten by a senior scribe, damaged by water at its edges. You study it for an hour before you touch your own materials. The numbers, the names, the measures, the phrasing. You read it until your eyes memorize the shape of each word. Only then do you begin. The first stroke is careful, too careful perhaps. Your hand is steady, but your breath catches in your chest. The brush tip trembles slightly as it presses into the fibers. You adjust your grip. Begin again. Ink flows. The first glyph emerges. In the year of the flood. You exhale, slowly, and continue. The process is slower than you expected, not because the writing is unfamiliar. It isn't, but because this time, there's no safety net. Every curve must land. Every angle must align. Every name must match. There are no instructors watching over your shoulder. Only silence and responsibility. The second column is numbers, measurements of oil, jars, units. You double-check everything before writing. One mistake, and a priest may be accused of theft. One reversed glyph, and a shipment could be misallocated. You begin to understand the full scope of what scribes protect. Not just ideas, but order, equity, reputation, the balance between wealth and want. By midday, your hand cramps. You pause, stretch your fingers, drink a little water, carefully, away from the scroll. Your eyes burn from the focus, but you do not rest. Instead, you move on to the names. This is the part you like most. There's something sacred about names. Each one holds a life, a story, a scent even. You can almost smell the dust of the roads they walked, the sweat on their brows as they loaded jars into boats. You write them with care. Nesamun, the boatkeeper. Hetepet, daughter of the olive press. Tiati, who signed with a thumbprint because he never learned glyphs. You write their roles, their contributions, their affiliations. And as you do, you feel yourself disappearing into the work. You're not just recording, you're preserving, elevating, granting them a place in history they might never have had otherwise. The last part is the seal, not yours. That will come later, perhaps. For now, you leave the space open, but you draw the preamble. Recorded by the hand of the temple's chosen servant, faithful to Thoth, may his lines endure. You pause before writing it. Then, deliberately, you dip the brush in red ink and complete the phrase. When you finish, the room feels too quiet. You sit back, blink, realize hours have passed without notice. Your legs are numb, your fingers are stained, your heart oddly light. You inspect the scroll again, line by line. No smudges, no gaps, no signs of hesitation. You roll it carefully, wrap it in linen, and carry it to the temple's administrative wing. The scribe at the desk is busy. He doesn't look up at first. Then, when he does, he lifts the linen, unwraps it, reads the first few lines, pauses, reads more. Then, without comment, places the scroll in a reed box, ties it shut with twine, and sets it on a shelf marked filed. You stand there, waiting, unsure if you're dismissed or expected to remain. After a long moment, he says, "There will be more," and turns back to his work. You walk back through the stone corridors alone. Something inside you feels altered, not triumphant, not relieved, just shifted. Like the first gust of wind that tells you a new season is coming. You touch the ink stain on your finger and smile. That night, Hekanak finds you by the water basin. He doesn't ask how it went. He only says, "They'll ask again soon." You nod, then show him the practice scroll you kept. He scans it, raises an eyebrow, points to one glyph. You wrote desert hair instead of oil amphora. You squint, laugh. "I was hungry." He chuckles, hands it back. "You'll do better on the next." And you do. Over the following weeks, more assignments come. Short records, inventory logs, seasonal offerings. You copy prayers for lesser priests, reformat hymns into chantable rhythms, even write a draft of a marriage contract, your first exposure to legal phrasing. Each scroll teaches you something new. Each one demands a different tone, a different kind of attention. You begin to think in categories, to write not just for beauty or clarity, but for function, for audience. You become fluent in temple shorthand. You learn to compress entire inventories into a single vertical column. You begin to hear rhythms in phrases before they reach the page. The work sharpens you, carves you, but it never grows dull, because with every scroll, you glimpse another thread in the vast tapestry of this world. A village, a family, a trade route, a weather pattern, a theft, a donation, a life beginning, a life ending. And you, with your ink, your hand, your breath, are the thread that ties them all. One morning, you are asked to oversee a younger novice's work. You do not correct harshly. You do not speak much, but you point, gesture, nod. And at the end, he bows to you, not because you are above him, but because for a moment, you stood where he one day hopes to stand. And that too is a kind of writing. A lesson not in ink, but in presence. The first time your own name appears in a document, it is small, tucked in the margin. By the hand of Amenemheb, novice of the House of Life. You trace it with your fingertip, not out of pride, but out of disbelief. That this name, your name, will now live in a basket of scrolls, filed among the records of 1,000 others. Read or unread, it will remain, and that is enough. You do not know what lies ahead. Larger commissions, perhaps, royal records, funerary inscriptions. Maybe one day, temple walls, or a scroll that bears only your brush, your rhythm, your legacy. But tonight, you return to your chamber. Wash the ink from your hands. Lie down beneath the stars flickering through the high slits in the wall, and smile, because your body is tired. But your name has begun. By now, you've grown used to being watched. Not in the way of suspicion or rivalry, but with a quiet scrutiny that seems to follow scribes wherever they go. It begins in the temple corridors, the way priests pause slightly as you pass, nodding with just enough acknowledgement to remind you of your place. Not beneath them, not above them, but beside them. Essential, unspoken, permanent. The more you write, the less you are seen as a student. People come to you not only with questions about script or phrasing, but with whispers. Could you check this number? Is this date correct? Do you remember the offering amount from last month's flood ledger? And each time you respond, sometimes aloud, sometimes with a mark in the margins, sometimes with silence, your way of saying, that's wrong, and you know it. Scribes are trusted not because they speak much, but because when they do, their words carry ink. You've begun to understand that writing is not neutral. It's not just preservation. It's not just art. It's power, quiet, patient, enduring power, and you are beginning to feel its weight. You're summoned early one morning by the senior scribe of the Outer Temple archives. The sun has barely warmed the walls. Your brush hasn't yet tasted ink. You follow the messenger, steps quick, heart slower. Inside the archive hall, scrolls line every wall, stacked in baskets and bundles, tagged with wax seals and scraps of dyed linen. The smell is intoxicating. Parchment, resin, dust, and something sweet you can't quite place. The air hums with the history of centuries, trapped in ink and fiber, The scribe, an older man named Kaimtat, hands you a short scroll. A dispute, he says, between two temple gardeners. One claims the other has taken his plot. The land boundary is unclear. The original markers eroded in the last flood. And what do they need? They need a written judgment, a scroll that declares, with the authority of the temple, which corner of the garden belongs to whom, and they want you to write it. The first thing you feel is disbelief, then caution, then pride, the kind that tightens the stomach, not swells the chest. You read the evidence. You walk the path between the two gardens. You speak to the men, not as a judge, but as a listener. One is older, his hands knotted like tree roots. The other is younger, loud, confident, not without charm. Both have worked this land for decades. Both believe themselves right. But only one has a surviving document, faded but legible. You take it back with you. Cross-reference the date, the measurements. Compare ink and phrasing. You double-check with a land record 3 shelves deep in the archives. And then, finally, when the sun is high and the breath of the temple stills, you write. The judgment scroll is short. 3 paragraphs. You phrase it without blame, without flourish, without ego. You let the record speak. And when you deliver it, rolled, sealed, placed gently in the hands of the senior scribe, he reads it once, then again, then says, "You will write more of these." You bow. Inside, something stirs. This wasn't a lesson. This was law, and you were its hand. Word spreads quickly. Not of your name, most don't even ask it, but of your clarity, your fairness, your refusal to rush. And soon, you find yourself writing more than scrolls. You're writing balance, peace, truth as best it can be drawn in ink. In the weeks that follow, you're invited into the second archive, the inner chamber, where high priests and royal emissaries deposit records not yet meant for the public. Letters sealed with clay, inventories from noble estates, reports on irrigation damage after the last sandstorm. One scroll stands out. It is unsigned, unsealed, written in haste. A complaint, perhaps, or a warning. It's hard to tell. But the phrasing is sharp, rushed. You're asked to transcribe it into official format. You do. Line by line, your brush slows the panic, straightens the tone, finds the rhythm behind the fear. When you finish, the high priest nods. This version, he says, the pharaoh can read. You're not told what happens next, but you hear weeks later that a scribe was exiled, another promoted, and the balance restored. All from a scroll your hand carried. You begin to feel more at ease around the older scribes. They no longer speak to you in clipped instructions. Now they ask for your opinion, invite you to compare translations, challenge you on subtle meanings, not to test you, but to sharpen you. You are no longer just being molded. You are molding others, slowly, invisibly, like water over stone. But the power is not without burden. One evening, you're handed a death report. Simple enough. A temple guard killed during a sandstorm while accompanying a grain caravan. But the numbers don't match. The number of guards deployed, the time of departure, the total grain accounted for on return. You check the scroll twice, 3 times. You find the inconsistency. You mark it in red ink, pass it on. Later that night, a fellow scribe comes to you. "You didn't have to mark that," he says quietly. "It was minor." You don't answer, because there's nothing to say. The ink speaks for you. There are no consequences, none that reach you, at least. But the lesson lingers. You are not only trusted, you are watched. Every mark is a choice, every correction, a declaration. And yet you don't stop. You can't, because even in the risk, there is meaning. Even in the silence that follows a dangerous line of text, there is something holy. You're not just recording what happened. You're protecting what should have happened. you're preserving the shape of the world. Your assignments grow more diverse. You begin to compose prayers for healing, blending traditional invocations with regional dialects for rural priests. You draft records of tax remissions, carefully worded to reflect the temple's generosity without suggesting weakness. You write inventories for offerings so vast you lose count halfway through, forced to recalibrate and begin again. Your brush does not falter, not anymore, even when your wrist aches, even when the ink dries too fast in the afternoon heat, even when your back throbs from hours of stillness, because this is no longer learning. This is life. One afternoon, you're given a scroll that simply says, "Write as if the gods are listening." There is no name attached, no instructions, just a stack of blank papyrus and the silence of trust. You take it back to your corner of the scriptorium. You think for a long time. Then you begin. Let the record be clear that in the days when the waters were kind and the sun bent gently upon the land, those who served with steady hands were seen. You pause, smile slightly, then continue. Not because you know where it's going, but because now you trust your own hand, your own voice, your own ink. You are still not the head scribe, still not carved into the temple walls, but you are no longer invisible, no longer questioned. And though your name remains in small script in the margins, your lines are read, spoken, quoted. People change their actions based on the scrolls you write, and that, you've come to realize, is enough. More than enough. Because this is what you were born into. Not fame, not gold, but the invisible weight of truth carried in silence, carried in ink. And tomorrow, another scroll will come, another judgment to phrase, another poem to shape, another error to correct, gently, firmly, clearly. And your hand, your ink-stained, steady scribe's hand, will be ready, as it always is. Not ink, not parchment. You know those well. This is different, heavier, thicker, a mixture of lotus oil, myrrh, and something burnt beneath it all. You've smelled it before, distantly, in rituals performed from behind the temple curtain. But now the scent is near, immediate, clinging to your robe and filling the hollows of your throat. You are being brought into the inner temple, not as a visitor, not as a boy, but as a scribe, a recorder of the sacred. They summon you at dawn. A silent novice delivers the message while you are preparing new papyrus sheets. He does not speak. He only bows, hands you a slip of linen marked with a single glyph, the eye of Horus, and departs. The symbol is clear. This is not a common task. You wash your hands again, even though they are already clean. Comb your hair again. Tighten the sash around your waist. You check your ink pots twice, then a third time. When you enter the courtyard, 2 temple guards are waiting. Their faces are still, unreadable. They do not bow. They simply walk. You follow. The air changes as you pass through the outer sanctum. Cooler, yes. The walls here are thicker, built to protect sacred relics and silence in equal measure. But there's more. A kind of vibration in the stone. A hush that is not absence of sound, but presence. You are entering the domain of gods, and your job is not to worship, it is to record. The chamber is low and wide, dimly lit by oil lamps carved into the shape of lotus buds. In the center, a raised platform. Upon it, scrolls, some sealed, some open, all resting on cloth so fine you're afraid to look directly at it. A priest you recognize, tall, pale-skinned, always draped in linen that never creases, approaches. He does not greet you, only says, "You will write what is said today." No embellishment, no omission. The god speaks through ritual. You must listen with more than ears. You nod, though the words unsettle you. How does one listen with more than ears? You are about to find out. The ritual begins with chanting, low, rhythmic, in a dialect older than your training. The language rolls across the stone, bouncing softly, echoing back distorted, like waves against a cavern wall. You don't understand every word, but you understand the tone. It is not celebration. It is summoning. The priests move in a slow circle, carrying incense, bowls of water, carved ivory figurines. One sprinkles powdered lapis across the ground. Another paints a glyph onto the floor with honey and ash. At the center of it all, a statue, small, gold, eyes made of crushed turquoise and jet. Thoth, of course, the god of writing, the god of what can and cannot be known. And you, a boy from a village of dust and fishnets, are here to be his hand. Your scroll is unrolled before you, held flat by two polished stones. You dip your brush. Begin. You write not what you understand, but what you witness. The gestures, the words, the sequence. Every detail must be exact. If a priest raises the left hand before the right, you mark it. If a chant pauses for breath, you leave a space. Even the time it takes for the incense to burn through a single stick, that too is recorded. Because ritual is not memory, it is instruction. For gods, maybe. But more so, for those who come after. You lose track of time. Your brush moves on instinct now, guided by the rhythm of flame and voice. At one point, the high priest turns directly toward the statue, lifts both arms, and chants a phrase so sharp it cuts through the air like flint on stone. Everything stops, even your breath. Then, silence, and the scent changes. You recognize it instantly. Cedar. It wasn't there before. No one moved. No one poured it. But the air has shifted. You write, at the moment of invocation, cedar filled the chamber. You don't know what it means, but you write it anyway, because your job is not to interpret, only to preserve. When the ritual ends, the priests leave in silence. No words are spoken to you. No thanks, no instructions. You gather your tools, blot your scroll, wrap it in linen, and carry it back through the corridors alone. But different, heavier, not with burden, but with presence. Like something has settled into your bones that wasn't there before. Not a god, not a curse, just memory, living memory. Back in your chamber, you unroll the scroll once more. Read it from the beginning. Your own glyphs feel foreign now, as though someone else wrote them. You spot one line that seems not wrong, but incomplete. You want to add something, a word, a feeling, a note of tension, but you don't, because that would be interpretation. And your task was witness, not author. In the weeks that follow, you are called back 3 more times, each ritual different. One for healing, one for renewal of the scribes, one to bless a new well outside the temple walls. Each time you observe, each time you write, and slowly your name begins to circulate. Not loudly, not in the open, but in quiet conversations, in nods from senior scribes, in the way priests glance at you a second longer than before. You are becoming known, not as a speaker, not as a priest, but as something older, stranger, more essential, a vessel. You begin to study older scrolls in your free time, not the instructional ones, the forgotten ones, marginal notes, abandoned drafts, fragments burned on one side. You find a piece of a scroll written by a scribe long dead, describing a ritual no one remembers. The phrasing is odd, the ink uneven, but the intent is clear. The scribe was unsure, untrained, young, and yet you feel a kinship. Because even then, even badly, he was trying to witness. You trace the lines with your finger, whisper the words to yourself, and vow to remember him, though you never learn his name. One day, you are called by the high priest himself. He is older than you imagined. His voice cracked, soft like reed mat underfoot. He sits behind a low table covered in prayer beads and tokens from a dozen festivals. He doesn't look at you as he speaks. There are moments, he says, when the gods speak clearly, others when they murmur. Your job is not to interpret either. Your job is to write them both the same. You nod. He finally looks at you. Can you do that? You don't answer. You simply unroll your scroll, dip your brush, and begin. Later, alone in the courtyard, you sit under the acacia tree that has begun to lean slightly east with age. You close your eyes. Try to remember the first time you held a shard of pottery and scratched a line into it. You can't. Not clearly. It's all blur now. Heat, dust, the weight of a stranger's hand on your shoulder. But you remember the feeling, the click, the shift, the sense that something unseen had cracked open in the air. And today, as the wind moves through the temple columns, you feel it again. Only this time, you're not watching it happen. You are part of it. A line in the scroll, a glyph in the margin, a witness to the sacred, a scribe. Some of the scrolls you write never see the sun again. They're sealed, stored deep in clay jars, placed in hidden chambers beneath temple floors, or behind walls inscribed with prayers to guard the sleeping. You are told these are for the gods, or for the dead, or perhaps for both. But the truth is, they're for silence. Not everything written is meant to be read. Not everything spoken is meant to echo. This, you learn slowly, quietly, not from a teacher, but from the work itself. It begins with confession scrolls. You're summoned one morning to a side chamber in the lower hall of the temple, a room barely large enough for two, dimly lit and lined with tightly closed reed baskets. The air is stale, dry. It feels like a place where breath goes to retire. The scribe waiting for you there is a woman named Satya. You've seen her before, rare among scribes, known for working directly with priests of judgment and dream interpretation. She greets you with a nod, her eyes heavy-lidded, as though perpetually returning from sleep. You're here to transcribe. You wait. She continues. The subject is dreaming, disturbingly. They believe it's a curse. The priest will speak. You will write. You are not to look at the dreamer. You are not to react. You nod once. Then the door opens. A young man enters, shoulders hunched, hands twitching at his sides. He does not look at you. He sits on a reed mat and stares ahead, lips moving before sound follows. The priest, a man with a long scar down one arm, begins chanting softly. He burns herbs, dips a reed into water, taps the bowl 3 times. The man closes his eyes and speaks. What he says at first is simple: a river, a snake, a mother's face. You transcribe each word with a careful hand, your mind narrowing into a tunnel of attention. But then the dreams darken. He describes being chased through fire. He describes sand that bleeds. He describes waking with marks on his skin he cannot explain. And you, with your ink and brush, preserve it all. This is your first dream scroll, but not your last. Over the next moons, more follow. A widow who hears the voice of her dead husband calling her from the well. A child who sees birds with human eyes in the corner of her room. A merchant who cannot stop dreaming of floods, even in the dry season. Each time, you are silent. Each time, your brush becomes their only witness. No one else will hear these words again. But they will live on, sealed in scrolls marked with the glyph for hidden. You begin to understand the burden of transcription, not just repetition, but containment. Satya tells you one night, over a bowl of lentils, some dreams are warnings, some are memories, and some are borrowed. You ask her what that means. She smiles. You'll know when it happens. You don't sleep well that night. It is not just dreams you're asked to write. Confessions too, spoken softly behind temple curtains. A baker who stole flour from the temple store. A priest who doubts the afterlife. A woman who cursed her neighbor's child and now fears she's cursed herself. Some of them weep. Some say nothing once the words leave their mouth, as if relieved to have passed the burden into your hands. You do not speak, you only write, and then you seal the scroll, sometimes with wax, sometimes with salt, sometimes with nothing but breath, and place it in the box marked only with a faded glyph, the closed eye. You begin to feel the weight of secrets. They do not haunt you, but they settle into your bones, quiet and dense. You start to recognize certain tones of voice. A tremor means guilt. A flatness means shame. A whisper, often, means truth. You never write faster than you do in these moments, because to pause is to question, and your task is to carry, not to challenge. One evening, you're called unexpectedly. The priest is in a bad mood. The scrolls are disorganized. You're handed 3 fragments. You are to rewrite a confession scroll, one damaged by mold, using your memory and what remains. You do, quickly, cleanly. As you're rolling it, the priest stops you. You're sure about this line. You read it. He fears that what he stole will follow him into the field of reeds. You nod. He said it twice. The priest frowns. He also said he returned it. You don't answer, because that's not what you heard. The priest studies you, then says, "Truth is a river," and walks away. You seal the scroll anyway. You begin to dream of words, not voices, not visions, just scrolls, thousands of them, some open, some tightly bound. You walk among them, barefoot, careful not to touch. Occasionally, one opens on its own, always to a name you do not know, always with ink that glows like fireflies. You never remember the lines when you wake. But you carry the feeling all day, a strange mix of reverence and responsibility. It's Satya who tells you one day, as you're washing brushes by the well, "There's a reason the gods chose scribes." You look up. She continues, "We're not the loudest, not the strongest, but we're the only ones who listen all the way through." You don't say anything, but you remember it, because it feels true, not only in your ears, but in your spine. You are no longer surprised when people lower their voice around you. You are no longer shocked by the things they say. You've heard of love betrayed and forgiven, of curses thrown in moments of fear, of stolen offerings returned in secret, weighed down by guilt. You never repeat these things. You wouldn't know how to, even if you tried, because once written, they change shape. They become something else. Not secrets anymore, but records, sacred in a different way. There are moments you question, not your purpose, but the nature of it. Why should your ink bear such weight? Why should your hand be the one chosen to remember what others want forgotten? And then, a boy comes to you, no older than you were when you arrived. He's trembling, says he dreamed of drowning in a scroll, that the words pulled him under, that he couldn't breathe through the ink. You sit him down, hand him your brush, let him write a single glyph on a potsherd. Breath. Then hand it back. He holds it like a charm, and smiles. You realize then, the scrolls are not prisons, they are lanterns. Some are kept in dark rooms, yes, but even then they glow, because to be written is to be seen. To be sealed is not to be erased, but to be honored, protected, held. One night, as the temple sleeps, you open one of the hidden scrolls, not to read, just to hold. The linen wrap is soft with age, the wax seal still firm. You whisper the name written on its edge. Then wrap it again, place it back, and bow your head. Because some stories are not for eyes. They are for presence, for trust, for stillness. And you are the keeper of that stillness, the scribe of what must be remembered, and what must never be spoken. You no longer measure your days by the sun. Not exactly. Instead, your rhythm is set by rituals, by scroll deliveries, by the thrum of distant chants echoing off stone walls. Time itself bends in the temple. Hours stretch or collapse, depending on what the gods demand, or what people whisper behind closed curtains. The more you write, the more you are pulled between worlds. There is the world of ink and accuracy, of scrolls and ritual. And there is the other, the one that walks barefoot through dreams, brushes past the statues in the inner sanctum, lingers on the edge of myth. You begin to see that the life of a scribe is not only about what is recorded. It is also about what is felt, but never written. You've been invited, or rather summoned, to assist in the preparation of a royal inventory scroll. Not the pharaoh's directly, but one of his lesser cousins, a governor assigned to a city along the western Nile bend. His estate is vast, his ego vaster. The priest who greets you is polite but clipped. He believes the gods owe him attention. You nod, though it tells you everything you need to know. What he wants isn't a scroll. He wants immortality. You travel by bark, seated among crates of wine and linen meant for tribute. The Nile is low this season, and the oars cut deep into the silt-coloured water. At night, you sleep on deck, head resting against your satchel of ink and brushes. You dream of fish with golden eyes, watching you from beneath the water, blinking slowly, silently. When you arrive, the estate rises out of the ground like a mirage. Whitewashed walls, columns painted in blue and red, servants scurrying like ants beneath the banners of the house. You are escorted to the atrium. You wait. Then, footsteps. And there he is, the governor. Gold rings, crocodile leather sandals, a voice trained to project across silence. He doesn't greet you, only says, "Make me remembered." The inventory is not complex, at least not on the surface. It lists his possessions, his donations, his temples, his ancestors, real and imagined. You write what he dictates, slowly, carefully. He watches every stroke, corrects not your glyphs, but your phrasing. Say, offered with reverence, not just offered. Say, chosen by the gods, not born into office. At first, you bristle. This is not truth. This is performance. But then, something in you softens. Because isn't that what writing has always been? A chosen version of what might have happened. And if your brush can offer peace to the penitent, can't it also offer pride to the powerful? You find yourself in strange places now. One evening, the governor insists on showing you his garden, a space of palm trees, imported herbs, a small pool lined with black stone. He speaks of his youth, his mother, his fear of drought. Then, abruptly, he stops, points to a statue of Thoth at the pool's edge. "Do you believe he listens?" he asks. You answer, "I believe he remembers." He nods once, and you both stand in silence. That night, you stay in the scribe's chamber. Linen sheets, clean water, a single candle flickering like a heart against the wall. You unroll the scroll, read what you've written. Most of it is true. Some of it is polished. But none of it is a lie. At least, not to him. You close the scroll. Sleep without dreaming. When you return to the temple, the air feels different. Lighter, wider. You realize that you've begun to carry the weight of others, their wishes, their fears, their versions of truth. And that somehow, this is part of being a scribe too. You are not just the recorder of facts. You are the weaver of meaning. The priest Satya greets you upon your return. She doesn't ask about your trip. She only hands you a scroll, already unwrapped. You recognize the glyphs. Dreamwork. A woman this time, middle-aged. She's been seeing a child in her dreams. Not her own, she insists. One with eyes like coal, who carries a small scroll in his mouth. You write it all, the imagery, the pacing, the way her hands shake as she speaks. And afterward, when she rises to leave, she pauses, looks at you, and whispers, "Tell me, do you think the dreams are messages?" You could say no. You could say they're shadows. But instead you say, I think the gods speak through whatever stays with us. She nods and leaves. In the evening, you walk the outer walls of the temple. The sun is a flat red coin on the horizon. You watch villagers walk past, carrying baskets, leading goats, guiding children who tug at their hands like dreams unformed. None of them know your name, but they know your scrolls. They hear them recited in ceremonies. They see your handwriting on market regulations, tax declarations, temple inventories. They don't look up when you pass, but they walk more evenly on roads you helped record. That's enough. Your brush changes, not physically. It's the same reed, same bristles, but your hand begins to move differently, smoother, more confident. You take fewer pauses, not because you're careless, but because you trust your choices. You no longer check every glyph against a master copy. You are the master copy now, and yet you remain cautious. Because every scribe knows, the moment you believe you are above the words, you begin to write lies. You're given a new student. Barely 13, bright eyes, restless fingers. He asks too many questions. You do not mind, but you teach him slowly, without praise, without critique, only presence. Hold your back straight. Watch the spacing. Breathe with the stroke. And slowly, he changes, like you once did, like all scribes must. One day, you're asked to write a scroll for a priest who has died. His possessions must be accounted for, his contributions recorded, his prayers transcribed and burned in offering. You do it with care, line by line. You find one of his older scrolls in the archive. You recognize his handwriting. Cramped, slanted slightly left. Consistent. You touch it, and something inside you quiets. This is what it means to last. Not to live forever, but to leave behind something worth rereading. You're asked to recite a hymn during a seasonal blessing. Not your voice, your scroll, but it feels the same. As the priest chants your words, people bow, offer grain, weep. And as the smoke curls into the sky, you feel your heart do something strange. It slows, settles, as if reminding you, you are exactly where you should be. Later that night, you sit beside the canal, bare feet in the water. The stars shimmer above like broken bits of shell, and you begin to hum, a tune your mother used to sing while weaving. You haven't thought of her in weeks, months, maybe more. You wonder if she's heard your name. If someone in the village said, "Your son's scroll was read in Thebes," you hope not. Because that's not the part that matters. The part that matters is this: the water, the ink, the brush in your hand, and the truth, always half hidden, waiting in the space between one glyph and the next. Silence becomes your closest companion. Not the silence of nothingness, but the layered quiet of watchfulness. The silence in which every rustle matters, every breath has rhythm, and every gesture carries weight. You are no longer surprised by it. In fact, you find that the more you write, the more you crave it. Not because you dislike people, but because silence has become your primary tool, your most trusted listener. The others speak of scribes as thinkers, artisans, even priests of the page. But you know the truth. Scribes are observers first. And to observe deeply, one must speak less than most would dare. Your mornings begin before the temple's first chants. You wake with the pale light that creeps across the upper wall slits, and you move before your name is called. Your brush is cleaned before others have stirred. You test your ink on a broken shard before any formal work begins, not for show, but because it soothes you, like stretching a sore joint before walking. The first lines you write each day are always the same. Let what is seen be seen truly. Not a prayer, not quite, more like a reminder, because today, as always, you will not be called to shout. You will be called to see. You are asked to attend a hearing, not a court, not officially, but it feels like one. 2 elders from a nearby town have arrived with a dispute. One claims the other has built his house over a shared boundary. The temple owns the land and thus must mediate. You are chosen to document it. You don't ask why. You just prepare your scroll. You walk behind the priests. You stand near the disputants. You watch. You listen. And you write. One man gestures with both hands, his voice high, frayed with emotion. The other stands still, speaking only when prompted, his gaze steady. Both insist the land is theirs. Both invoke memories no one else can confirm. You record it all. You record the words and also the pauses between them. How the older man stammered before naming the year of his claim. How the younger one looked down when asked about his neighbor's harvest. You record not verdicts, but texture, because this, too, is part of the truth, and your scroll will become the only account that remains when their voices fade. The dispute is settled with a line drawn in sand, measured by the shadow of a standing reed at midday. You record that too. When they sign, one with a glyph, one with a thumbprint, they do not look at you, but you are not offended. You are not there to be seen. You are there so that they may be seen forever. There are days when you do not speak at all, when you pass from chamber to scriptorium to archive without a single word. And yet your mind is full of conversation, with the past, with the imagined, with the glyphs themselves. You begin to notice how a slight variation in the bread symbol changes tone. How a line too close to the margin suggests haste. How ink thickens with hesitation. Writing is no longer just meaning, it is mood, emotion, a whisper captured in fibre and soot. You find solace in old scrolls, not the famous ones, not the public decrees or royal tributes, but the forgotten pieces, letters between minor priests and their sons, apologies scrawled hastily and never sent, descriptions of river levels from 10, 15, 20 flood seasons ago. You read them like a healer checks a pulse. You touch the glyphs lightly. You trace the brushstrokes with your breath. And sometimes you find a word that feels as if it were written just for you. Like someone, long dead, still wanted you to know what they couldn't say aloud. One evening, after a long day of recording temple offerings, line after line of jars, weights, spices, grains, you are asked to join the others at the evening fire. You sit quietly at the edge of the circle. Someone begins to sing. Another recites a fragment of a tale, a god who disguised himself as a crocodile to spy on mortals. Laughter follows. You smile, you say nothing, but you memorize the rhythm of the story. And that night, when you return to your cot, you write it down. Not because it was requested, not because it's sacred, but because it was alive. And you felt it pass through you. A month passes, then another. You receive no new student, but more responsibilities. You begin preparing template scrolls for scribes in smaller temples. They ask for formats, funeral registers, marriage rites, oaths of priesthood. You provide them, clean, balanced, annotated in the margins, with ink barely visible. You do not sign them. You do not need to. Those who read them know who shaped the scroll, even if they don't know your name. One afternoon, you find a scroll tucked inside your writing satchel. You don't recognize the script at first. It's older, cruder. You realize it's from your first year. Your own work. A fragment. An attempt at translating a hymn of praise. The lines are clumsy. The spacing inconsistent. You almost laugh. But then, you read the final line. And in the silence, the truth waits to be carved. You have no memory of writing it, but it is your hand, your phrasing, and somehow it still holds, not just meaning, but honesty. You roll it again, place it in your personal box, not as a keepsake, but as a compass. There's a new priest now, young, eager, too loud in the corridors. He approaches you after a ritual, scroll in hand, asking for a copy of a decree that hasn't been completed yet. You nod, but do not rush. You return to your work first. Then, when the ink is ready, when the brush feels right in your grip, you begin. You deliver it later that day. He frowns. I needed it this morning. You bow slightly. Say only, now it's correct. He says nothing, just reads it, pauses, and walks away. Your silence is not defiance, it is discipline. You have learned that the most lasting words are the ones not interrupted by haste. And those who truly understand scribes respect the pause. At the end of the season, you are invited to witness the creation of a wall inscription, a rare honor. Stoneworkers chip away as the high scribe recites. You sit beside him, transcribing each phrase as it is chiseled. The sound of hammer and stone is sharp, jarring, but you do not flinch. Because this is permanence. The kind of writing that cannot be unrolled, that cannot be hidden in a basket. Each glyph is declared aloud, struck into the face of the earth. And you are its quiet mirror. When the wall is finished, a boy passes his hand across the symbols. Will they last? He asks. You think for a moment, then reply, as long as someone wants them to. He looks confused, but he'll understand one day. Maybe. Or maybe he'll read one of your scrolls instead. And feel something stir, something unspoken, something that says, this mattered. You return to your chamber late that night. Your brush is clean, your hands inkless, but your mind is full. You unroll a new scroll, dip the brush, and write. Not all voices must be heard. Some must be held, in silence, in stillness, in ink. Then you roll the scroll and smile, because sometimes silence is the loudest truth of all. The dead arrive quietly. They do not knock. They do not speak. They come in wrapped linen, on wooden biers, or in baskets of reed, carried by families, by priests, or by strangers fulfilling an old promise. And when they come, they bring with them more than silence. They bring questions about what was done, what will be remembered, and what the gods might choose to forget. You are not a priest. You are not there to offer prayers. But your ink will follow the dead further than most voices ever could. Because someone must write their names. Their offerings, their virtues, their final requests, and more often than not, that someone is you. You are summoned to the funerary house near the western gate of the temple. It is not a place of sorrow, not overtly. It is too still for that. The walls are pale. The air smells of natron and resin. Outside, the palm trees sway under the late morning light. Inside, no one speaks unless needed. A man has died, not noble, not poor. A craftsman, they say, builder of boats. His sons brought his body wrapped in coarse linen, still marked with soot and tar. He was not a scribe, but he touched the Nile. That is enough. The high priest calls for a burial inscription. Short, honest, without embellishment. You are handed a blank scroll. You sit beneath the open archway, the breeze cool on your face, and begin. You write his name first, Menashe, son of Nebtu, then his role, worker of cedar, smoother of hulls, father of four, then the date. He died in the season of the harvest beneath a waning moon. And finally, the prayer. May his voice be true before the tribunal. May his hands be clean before the ferryman. May his name be spoken as long as boats cross the river. You blot the ink, reread the lines. No flourishes, just stillness, just truth. You roll the scroll, tie it, and hand it over. Later, one of the sons approaches you in the courtyard. He does not speak right away. Then, hesitantly, he asks, "Will the gods read what you wrote?" You shake your head gently. They don't need to. They already know. He nods, but you can see his hands trembling. You place the scroll in his palms. Then it's for you. In the days that follow, the funerary tasks increase. A priestess who taught in the lower temple succumbs to fever. You write a eulogy that will be recited before her ashes are placed in the earth. She taught without pride. She gave without record. She sang the hymns even when no one listened, A merchant dies in his sleep, with no family to claim him. The temple funds his burial. You write the minimum required: name, date, profession, then add a final line. He paid his debts, even those never recorded. No one asks you to. No one notices. But you do. Some scrolls are burned, released to smoke and wind, meant to carry the name to the heavens. Others are sealed in tombs, placed beside the body. You never know which fate awaits your words. But that's not your concern. You're not here for eternity. You're here for precision, for reverence, for closure. One morning, Satya brings you a fragment of a funerary spell. The papyrus is torn, molded along one edge. But the ink is visible, part of a negative confession. Those famous lines spoken before judgment in the Hall of Mayat. She points to a missing glyph. What would you place here? You study the space. The sentence reads, "I have not asked the bread of the poor." Your mind offers several options: taken, stolen, withheld. But you pause, then write, "I have not forgotten the bread of the poor." Satya reads it twice, then says, "Good." You are not sure if she means accurate or compassionate, but perhaps it no longer matters. You begin to feel the thinness between worlds, the breath that separates the living from the written, the body from the name, the action from the memory. You walk more slowly now, not from fatigue, but because you sense your steps leaving traces. Each scroll you complete feels like a lantern placed in the dark, a way to say, this life mattered, this one was seen, and in the echo of every completed line, you feel something loosen in the air, as if the world briefly exhaled. Sometimes the families want more: a poem, a phrase, a single word to describe a lifetime. You offer options. Sometimes they choose beloved, other times faithful, or generous, or joyful. One woman asks for none of those. She points at your scroll and says, "Write this instead. He was tired, and now he is not." You hesitate, then nod, and do exactly as she asks. The scrolls come faster now. You begin to recognize patterns: the same prayer, the same regrets, the same handful of mistakes we all seem to make, spoken into your ear, then onto your page, then into fire or stone. You never grow numb, only more quiet, more attuned, more grateful for the way people still wish to be remembered, even when they're gone. You're asked to assist in preparing a tomb wall inscription. You draft the lines first on papyrus, then mark them in red ink onto limestone. You use a reed dipped in chalk dust. The stonemason follows your marks, chipping each glyph into permanence. It's a slow process, days of dust and echoes, but when it's finished, the wall glows. And there, beside the depiction of the man hunting birds and playing senet with his wife, your words read, "He laughed often, he listened always. He knew the names of every child in the courtyard. It is not grand, but it is true." And that, you've learned, is the highest form of praise. One evening, after delivering a scroll to a grieving daughter, you walk alone along the banks of the canal. The sky is ink dark. The stars flicker like flame tips. You kneel. Take out your personal scroll. The one no one sees, the one you write in when the noise of other lives becomes too loud, and you add a single line: "When my time comes, let someone write me plain. No more than what I gave, no less than what I tried." You roll it again, place it back in the pouch at your side, and walk on. The water murmurs beside you, the reeds sway, and in the hush of the evening, you feel the presence of all the names you've written before, soft, weightless, like breath. There is a chamber in the temple that almost no one speaks of. It has no formal name. No prayer is chanted before entering. No incense is burned in its honor. Yet every scribe who has ever worked in the temple knows of it. Not from lessons, but from whispers, from glances exchanged when scrolls go missing, or when names vanish from records without warning. You first hear of it when Satya says, offhandedly, Some writings are too loud for the world. You think she's speaking of poetic rhythm. But then she adds, "That's where they go." And she does not elaborate. You do not find the room. It finds you. It begins when you are handed a scroll, unsigned, unsealed, that contains a story, a narrative unlike anything you've ever written. Not about gods, not about grain or taxes or deaths. It is about a girl, no titles, no dates, just a girl who could hear the color of people's voices. A girl who one day wrote down what she heard and was exiled for it. You read the scroll 3 times. The language is strange, simple yet saturated with metaphor. The glyphs twist in a pattern that feels coded, though nothing is hidden. You ask who wrote it. The priest frowns, then says only, "It belongs in the room." And that is how it begins. A priest leads you through a corridor you thought ended at a storage hall. But today, a curtain is drawn aside, a door revealed, carved from dark wood, with a single glyph inlaid in silver. Sesh, to write. Inside, the room is colder than you expect. And dim, but not empty. Scrolls line every wall. Some are wrapped tightly, others left open on tilted tables. You can feel them, even before you approach. The weight of unspoken stories, the ones that were never supposed to leave breath. The priest gestures. You place your scroll carefully on an empty shelf. You don't ask questions, not because you're afraid, but because you already understand. This is not a place for certainty. It's a place for possibility, for danger, for stories that ask too much of the world to be shared too soon. You return to the chamber once more, weeks later, this time alone. You are not stopped. You walk in silence, breath held, as if entering a tomb. But this is not a tomb. It is a threshold. You begin reading. One scroll speaks of a man who believes the gods have left, and the stars are the echo of their absence. Another describes a city that dreams each night of another version of itself. And slowly, the dreams are becoming more real than the walls. You copy none of it. You memorize what you can. And you leave, changed. You cannot unknow these stories. They follow you, in the lines you write, in the silences between tasks. You begin to see how every official scroll, every decree, hymn, tax record, lives beside another scroll, one that was never written or never shared. There is the truth of what happened, and the truth of what was felt. Both matter. Only one is allowed. You begin writing again in your private scroll, more frequently now. Not dreams, not rituals, just thoughts, questions, fragments of observations too strange or tender for the archives. You write of the boy who flinched at the sound of bells, but never at thunder. You write of the woman who spoke only in proverbs, even in grief. You write of the way a dying man once said, "Let the sun not pity me." You do not know why you write these things, but you know they must be written, even if only for you. Then one day, you are asked to write something different, a scroll of remembrance, but not for a person, for a place. The city of Jeru, once known for its copper trade and wheat fields, has been swallowed by drought and abandonment. A ritual is held to mark its passage into memory, and you are to compose the scroll. There are no survivors, only a few artifacts and records of names. You read the census, study the maps, speak to an old trader who once passed through, and then you write, "The city of Jeru drank deeply and gave freely. Its wells were shallow, but its songs were deep. Let the stones remember their laughter." The priest reads it aloud, and no one speaks afterward. You begin thinking about places more often, about the way memory clings to stone, to dust, to reed and rope and ash. You visit the temple's oldest walls, run your fingers over faded glyphs, half erased by time. You imagine the scribe who etched them, what he wore, what he feared. what he whispered under his breath as he worked. You add nothing to the wall, but you bow to it, because to read is also to offer thanks. A novice approaches you one day. He is nervous, asks to see your private scroll. You hesitate, then say no, but you give him something else. A blank fragment. And a single phrase, "Not every truth fits in the archive." He reads it, then nods, and you know he understands, or will someday. More requests come. You are asked to draft the opening lines of a new scribe's handbook, to revise the scroll of offerings for the spring equinox, to judge a contest between two temple poets. You choose the one whose lines made you pause. You are no longer just a writer, you are a shaper of language, of legacy, of the silence between scrolls. But with that comes responsibility. You correct a high priest's record. He is not pleased. He says nothing directly. But your next assignment is delayed, your privileges restricted. You do not complain. You wait. And when your brush touches papyrus again, your hand does not shake. Because truth, you've learned, is like ink. It seeps. Eventually, it shows. One night, in the hidden chamber, you find a scroll wrapped in red linen. You almost pass it by, but the color draws you. You open it and find a letter from a scribe to a future scribe. It is unsigned, dated from nearly a century ago. Its words are simple. You will not be praised, you will not be carved in stone. But if you do this well, someone will walk straighter tomorrow because of a line you shaped. And they'll never know your name. That is the sacred duty. That is the quiet gift. You copy the line, add it to your own scroll, and close the chamber door behind you. Outside, the moon is thin, the wind is soft, and the stars do not speak. But you listen anyway, brush in hand, truth in heart, ready for whatever must be written next. You begin to understand that the longer you write, the more invisible you become. It's not that you're forgotten. Your presence is known, your scrolls are used, your handwriting is recognized. But yourself, your voice, fades beneath the ink. And strangely, you welcome it. Because this invisibility is not erasure, it's transformation. You are becoming a channel, a vessel. And vessels are meant to be filled, not displayed. The temple grows quieter as the season turns. The air thickens, heavy with dust from the western winds. Fewer travelers arrive. The Nile recedes, bearing cracked earth like old scars. Even the priests move more slowly, weighed down by the heat. You, however, write more than ever. Requests pile in. Translations, transcriptions, ceremonial scripts, personal letters, even riddles for the upcoming festival of renewal. Some scrolls come from distant temples, others from neighboring households. One is delivered without a sender, wrapped in blue cloth with only a glyph meaning remember. You open it. It contains a poem, strange, unstructured, but it holds something potent. You copy it. You do not ask why, because some words ask only to be preserved. You're summoned by the head archivist, a woman named Myrti, older than any scribe you've met, her fingers permanently ink-stained, her eyes clouded but sharp. She hands you a bundle. 3 scrolls, she says. They need decoding. The ink is faded, the phrasing outdated. They were found behind the old census shelves. You nod. Take them. She stops you at the door. Be careful. Sometimes what was hidden was meant to stay that way. You bow and leave. In your chamber, under a flickering oil lamp, you unroll the first scroll. It's a chant, a repetitive invocation to the god Ptah. But the refrain changes subtly every few lines. Not in meaning, in tone. The first is joyous, then reverent, then sorrowful. You notice the glyph for life is altered in the final stanza, elongated, inverted. It reads more like longing. You mark it. Keep reading. The second scroll is stranger. A list. Not of goods, but of moments. It begins. The first time she smiled. Then, the third day of waiting. The breath between questions. Each line is a memory, not yours. Not attached to a name, but specific, tender, unfiltered. You read all 97 lines. By the end, you are weeping. Quietly. You write only one note in the margin. True. You do not know what else to say. The third scroll is incomplete. Torn at the end. It speaks of a temple that dreamed, a structure that grew its own stories, walls that recorded what people felt, not what they said. You reread that phrase 5 times. What people felt, not what they said. You close the scroll, sit in stillness, and begin a new page, not to translate, but to respond. You write, if walls could write, what would they forget? If ink knew the truth, would it lie? Is silence a mistake or mercy? You do not seal the scroll. You place it beneath your cot, like a heartbeat, waiting. Later that week, you are assigned to teach a group of novices. They sit in a circle, feet tucked beneath them, their hands stained with trial ink. You do not lecture. You hand each a shard of pottery. Ask them to write one truth, only one. They frown, squint. One writes, the sun is hot. Another, my father is gone. A girl hesitates, then writes, I fear being forgotten. You say nothing, just nod, and collect the shards in a cloth. You'll keep them, not to show, but to remember. The festival of renewal approaches. The temple begins to buzz. Drummers rehearse. Chant leaders practice harmonies. Weavers dye long sashes of blue and gold. You are asked to compose the central hymn. You are given guidelines. It must include the cycle of the Nile, the blessings of the gods, the promise of return. But the rest, the tone, the rhythm, the soul, is yours. You spend 3 days alone, walking, listening, writing nothing. Then, on the 4th morning, as the sky turns amber, you begin. We return to the silence. We return to the seed. We return to the name that shaped the breath before language. And the gods, they do not come. They wait. Because waiting is the holiest act of all. The priests do not question your words. They chant them, and for the first time in your life, you hear your own glyphs spoken by 200 voices at once. You do not cry, but you close your eyes and let them carry you. The night after the festival, you walk along the riverbank. The reeds sway. The stars shimmer like half-buried stones. You take out your private scroll. Add a single line. There is a silence so deep, it sings. You roll the scroll, place it in the pouch at your side, and smile, because even now, you are still learning to listen. Your reflection in the basin's water has changed. It no longer shows the face of a boy folded between stone walls and papyrus scrolls. What stares back is the profile of someone who keeps ancient secrets, of people, of gods, of time. You barely notice your own fatigue. It blends with the stillness of the corridors, with the hush that slides between the torches in the side altars, with the fevered breath of the hieroglyphs waiting beneath your brush. Today, you are summoned to the rear courtyard, where sunlight falls gently across a structure you've only heard about in whispered tales, the papyrus vault. A vast chamber with tall vents and shelves that climb from floor to ceiling, groaning beneath the weight of memory. A chamber where fragile scrolls and heavy tomes, dry and damp alike, hold wars, sacrifices, secret tombs, and public laughter. And where you, the quiet scribe, now stand at the center of that silence. The shelf is marked with a red cord, a sign of attention or sometimes of danger. You do not ignore the warning. You breathe deeply. The archivist's assistant hands you a small scroll, charred along its edges. The letters are cloaked in soot, perhaps from a fire. Many earlier temples lost libraries to sandstorms carrying sparks, or to rivalries more human than divine. You examine the scroll. Sitting cross-legged on the cool floor, you unravel the velvet-burned edge with care, revealing what remains without damaging what still lives. The faint torchlight trembles over the barely visible ink. Words emerge, hesitant, flickering, consonants dissolving and joining. It's a letter, likely from one scribe to a younger brother before the great sickness that swept through the valley 2 moons ago. The script trembles. Near the end, longing coils like smoke. Remember, what I say in silence is louder than any command. When you return, we will read together, for memory chooses our hearts. You frown slightly. The voice of the scribe crosses the silence of years. You exhale, run your finger gently across the lines. In that moment, you understand that your work extends beyond ritual and record. It is inheritance, escort. Through the long hours that follow, you work to restore the traces. You determine, between almost erased lines, whether this was a festival song, a letter of missing, a warning. You request the fine brushes dipped in elderflower water, the liquid always used to preserve sacred writing. The task requires more than precision. It demands patience. Seated among the ancient shelves, you realize scrolls don't dream alone. They wait passively for someone to love them again, even briefly. Restoration is not merely a reconstruction. It renews the thread between writer and reader. You smile for a moment, a flicker inside the flame. That night, you walk through the temple's outer corridor beneath red stars. The wind carries the scent of incense. You hold the now clean scroll in both hands, wrapped in white linen. The sadness of that old voice lingers in the still air. Back in your quarters, you retreat to the darkest corner. You open the scroll. It's not just words. It's a piece of someone who likely knew fear, hope, uncertainty. And then you spot a side note, scribbled faintly in the margins. There is no glory in words that fly, but there is eternity in those that stay. Again you smile, your pen gently touching the old script. By dawn, the restored scroll is placed on the shelf designated by the archivist, in the section labeled Watchful Texts. A group of scholars will later study it. But for you, the scribe who guards, restores, preserves, the task has left a delicate mark inside your chest. A new understanding. Writing is the bridge between silences, between embraces that never arrived, between voices we'll never read, and those that still touch us without knowing. In that quiet hour, you close your eyes, press the scroll to your heart, and whisper, "Until someone reads me," and smile. Not literally. No movement, no warmth. But you sense it all the same. When you unwrap a roll of papyrus, long forgotten on a dusty shelf, there's a moment, just before you read, when the air around you thickens. You hold your breath, not out of fear, out of reverence, as if some part of the scroll remembers being read, and now waits for your eyes like a long-lost friend. This is the work few understand. They see the ink, they see the ritual, but they do not feel the return. You do. It begins with a scroll you weren't meant to open, not forbidden, simply misplaced, orphaned from its original index. You find it behind a stack of trade inventories, sealed in beeswax and bound in cloth of deep grey. The glyph on the outer wrapping is unusual, an eye closed by a single downward brushstroke. You pause, then unwrap it. Inside, not a decree, not a prayer, a story. It begins without preamble. There was once a boy born without a shadow. You read on, breath catching in your throat. The tale unfolds slowly. The boy walks through the city unseen, unheard, even by animals. No one remembers his name. He cannot speak his own. He writes, but the ink fades moments after his brush lifts. He learns to live between words, not speaking, but shaping the spaces where words once lived. You stop. Place the scroll gently in your lap. Your hands are shaking. Because for the first time, you feel as though someone wrote you. Not a version of you, but you. You copy the story, line by line, slowly, as if afraid you might lose the rhythm. The copy you keep for yourself. You place the original back into its cloth, reseal it, and return it to the shelf marked unsorted. You do not claim it. You do not ask who wrote it. You already know the answer, someone who understood. The next day, a priest asks you to assist with a set of funerary verses. The family is specific. The deceased was a musician, and they want the verses to carry rhythm, not just meaning. You agree. And begin. But your brush stutters. The ink does not glide. You look to the copied scroll on your desk, the one about the boy without a shadow. And an idea rises, unbidden. You change the structure. Write the verses as if they were sung in silence. Short phrases, spaces between them, echoes that linger. When you read it aloud, even the priest lowers his gaze. Not in critique, in respect. You've written something they didn't expect to hear. Later that week, you are asked to record a public judgment. Two merchants disputing a debt that spans years. You take your position beside the pillar of Horus. You write the opening lines. You listen. But as the arguments unfold, you find your brush slowing. Their words are loud, but their meaning is thin, filled with posturing, filled with fear. You capture what they say, but also what they refuse to say. You leave gaps, not mistakes, spaces, for truth unspoken. The priest reviews your scroll and says, "You left out part of the testimony." You reply calmly, "It was never offered." He raises an eyebrow, says nothing more. That night, you dream of the shadowless boy again. Only now, he stands at a table, scribing. You watch him dip his brush in a bowl of water. But when he writes, the water stains the scroll, and glyphs appear on their own, as if drawn from within the page. When you wake, your fingers feel cold, but your heart feels full. You are called to write for a birth this time. A rare request. The family wants a record of their child's first breath. You ask for details. The hour, the scent in the air, the names whispered, the song sung by the grandmother before dawn. They give you everything. You write not just the event. You write the arrival. You write the silence that came before the cry. The warmth in the mother's hand. The sound of the reed flute in the hallway. When you deliver the scroll, the father reads it, then clutches it to his chest. "Will he know this was real?" he asks. You answer, "Only if someone remembers." You start writing smaller lines in your personal scroll, not full thoughts, just glimpses, like the quiet after forgiveness, the taste of ink when you cry while writing. A name is a door. These lines are not for anyone else. But they remind you that even in silence, you are still recording something living. You return to the papyrus vault more often now. The grey-wrapped scroll is gone, replaced by others, each one strange, each one beautiful. One contains only questions, 53 of them, all unanswered. One is a list of things someone loved and never spoke of. Another is blank, except for a single phrase in the center. "When they ask who I was, tell them I listened." You copy that one too. Place it at the end of your private scroll. Fold it in linen, and keep it near your heart. Satya visits your chamber one morning. She brings you a new brush. It's old, worn at the handle, but balanced. "I thought you'd like it," she says. You thank her, and then ask, "Do you ever feel like you're writing ghosts?" She smiles faintly. "No, I feel like they're writing through me." And with that, she leaves. That day, you begin a new scroll for the temple's central archive. It will document a year of stories, births, deaths, dreams, disputes, confessions, blessings. It will not bear your name, but your glyphs, your voice, will be everywhere. You start with one line. This year carried more silence than any before. Then you begin to fill it, carefully, honestly, without rush, because you've learned, ink remembers more than words. It remembers the weight behind them, the breath between them, the silence beneath them, and you are its keeper. You are called at dawn, not by a priest, not by a novice, but by a messenger from the palace. His robe bears the faint shimmer of official dyes. His hands clutch a scroll bound in blue twine, the color reserved for royal summons. He says nothing at first, just holds it out to you. You bow before accepting it. The glyph on the seal is unmistakable, the Eye of Ra, stylized with precision and authority, a decree from the court. Perhaps not from the pharaoh himself, but close, very close. You do not speak. You only bow again, deeper. The messenger turns without another word, and you are left holding the summons, light as reed, heavy as fate. Inside, the scroll is brief, a request, a command. Your presence is required at the House of Royal Records. You are to assist in the transcription of a series of sacred proclamations delivered by a court oracle. The language will be symbolic, the tone prophetic. Your task is to preserve it exactly as spoken, without interpretation, without correction. You understand what this means. You are to listen to the gods, and you are to write. Your journey to the palace is long, though not difficult. You are escorted along the river by temple guards. They do not speak, but their silence is not hostile. It is reverent, protective, as though you are carrying something precious, though your hands are empty. When the palace comes into view, its size strikes you first. Not its grandeur, you expected that, but its symmetry. Every column deliberate, every wall aligned. Nothing left to chance. You are ushered through side passages, past inner courtyards, into a small chamber of polished limestone. Here, the oracle waits. She is younger than you imagined, her eyes closed, her breathing slow. 3 priests surround her, 2 chanting, 1 pouring water over stones that steam softly in a corner brazier. You are shown your place, a low seat, a flat scroll, a brush, ink already mixed, a darker hue than you usually use, almost black. The air smells of myrrh and something else, something sharp, like thunder before rain. The head priest nods, the chanting stops, and the oracle begins. At first her voice is steady, measured. She speaks of the Nile's moods, of the stars bending, of salt in the wind. You write every word, even the ones that don't make sense. Some are glyphs you've never seen. Others are combinations of known symbols in unfamiliar arrangements. You write anyway, because your task is not to understand. Your task is to witness, to preserve, to hold the words until time is ready to read them. Then her voice shifts. It rises, splinters. She speaks in fragments now, images tumbling from her lips. A lion made of clay, a tree that bleeds gold, a child who weeps stones. You hesitate for only a breath. Then you keep writing, faster now. Your brush moving like it has memory of its own. You no longer hear with your ears. You hear with your fingers, with your spine, with something beneath your ribs. You are not writing what you hear. You are writing what is meant. When she stops, the silence is immediate, like a curtain falling. The priests move quickly. They lift her, wrap her in linen, carry her out. You are left alone, still holding your brush. The ink is dry. You place the scroll gently on the table. Step back and bow. Not to the room, to the voice that passed through it. Later, in a separate chamber, a court scribe reviews your work. He says nothing for a long time. Then, you captured the pattern. You nod. He doesn't praise you, but he doesn't correct you either, which in the palace is rare enough to be considered a gift. You stay in the palace for 2 more days, not as a guest, not quite as a prisoner, as a resource. You are asked to write copies, to interpret diagrams, to prepare ceremonial scripts based on the oracle's visions. You sleep in a room with no windows, eat alone. But you do not mind, because every task feels alive. Every word you write feels like a thread woven into something much larger than a scroll. On the 3rd morning, you are taken to a garden. Unexpected, open sky, palm trees swaying above polished stone, a quiet pool at the center. A man sits at the edge, not dressed as royalty, but you know who he is. Not the pharaoh, but a son. A speaker, a vessel of inherited power. He gestures for you to sit. You do. He says only one thing. Will it last? You do not ask what he means. You answer, only if someone reads it again. He nods. That is enough. You are dismissed. On the journey back to the temple, your thoughts do not rush. They settle, like ink in still water. You think not of the palace, not of the garden, but of the scroll you wrote during the oracle's trance. You think of the symbols that have no names, the lines that felt like thunder. You wonder if you were meant to understand them, or only to carry them, like fire in a sealed jar, dangerous, but necessary. Back in your chamber, you open your personal scroll. You write, "Today I did not speak, but the world spoke through me, and I listened." Then you add another line. Some truths do not ask to be believed, only remembered. You roll the scroll, place it near your sleeping mat, and close your eyes. The voice of the oracle still echoing in your chest, soft, vast, untranslated, not just in papyrus that crumbles under breath, or in ink that fades in sunlight, but in memory itself, in the sharpness of names spoken once, then lost, in stories half told, interrupted by silence or death, in truths buried too deep to resurface, and in yourself. You do not fear this, but you feel it more keenly than before, this slow erosion of certainty, this quiet reminder that nothing you write is permanent. Not really. It can be burned, forgotten, rewritten, and still, you write. Because sometimes it is the act itself that grants meaning, not the result. One morning, you are tasked with transcribing a scroll that has begun to decay. It is a record from a generation ago, a ceremony of harvest and forgiveness, held during a drought that nearly split the village apart. You do not know the people mentioned. Most are likely dead. The priest who conducted the ritual is now a name on a tomb wall. But the words, they pulse, they ache. You read, "And when the rain did not come, the people poured water from their own cups into the soil. They said, 'If the gods are thirsty, let them drink what we offer freely.'" You stop, you read it again, then copy the lines slowly, carefully, as if it were the last thing anyone would ever say to the sky. You begin collecting fragments, not officially, just gently. A corner torn from a letter, a discarded practice scroll, a forgotten footnote in the back of an accounting list. You do not catalogue them, you simply store them, tuck them between folded linens, inside your personal writing kit, because they speak. In their incompleteness, they remind you that even half-told stories deserve a listener. A new novice asks to study under you. You hesitate. You are not as patient as you once were. You move more slowly now, but not gently. Still, you agree. Her name is Nebet. She is quiet, curious. Her strokes are uneven, but intentional. She does not try to impress you. She tries to understand. You respect that. On her 3rd day, she asks a question you did not expect. Do you ever wish to be remembered? You do not answer right away. You finish the line you're writing. Then you say, "No, I wish to be useful." She nods, writes it down. You glance over and realize that's how it begins. how someone becomes a scribe, not with praise, but with understanding. You're given a scroll that has been copied 5 times by 5 different hands. Your job is to compare them. Identify the one closest to the original, which of course no longer exists. It's a parable of judgment. A merchant, a beggar, and a liar walk into a storm. Each thinks the gods will save him first. Only the one who kneels in silence is spared. In one version, the liar repents. In another, he mocks the gods. In a third, he survives and writes the tale. You choose the 4th copy. The one where the scroll ends not with a verdict, but with a question. You start waking before dawn, not from duty, from thought, from memory. Sometimes you walk the temple corridors in silence, brush in hand, though you do not write. You pause before the statue of Ma'at, where justice and truth are weighed. You whisper, "What have I carried that was not mine?" Then you bow and keep walking. You begin a new scroll in your private box. It is untitled, but you know what it is. Your confession. Not of crimes, of moments. Moments when you should have spoken but did not. Moments when you wrote what was asked, not what was needed. You list them, each with a single glyph, each marked with a stroke of grey ink. You do not seek forgiveness, only record. A storm comes, violent. The wind tears through the upper storage vaults. Scrolls fall. Some break, some vanish. You spend a day resorting, another rewriting what was lost. You find one that had been started by a student and never finished. The first line reads, "I thought writing would make me feel powerful." You finish it, but it only made me feel true. You don't sign it. You place it in the anonymous teaching shelf, because not every truth needs a name. Nebet surprises you one morning. She presents a scroll she's been working on, not for study, for herself, a dream she had. She writes of a river that flowed backward, of books that grew from trees, of people who spoke in color. You read it, and when you finish, you say only, "Keep going," because that's what you needed once too. You are asked to give a public recitation during the Temple of Renewal ceremony. You decline, not out of humility, but because your words are already there. In the hymn they will chant, in the blessing on the grain bowls, in the scroll passed to every guest. Your presence is unnecessary. Your voice has already arrived. You receive a gift. From the palace, a small box. Inside, a reed brush carved with your glyph. No note, no seal. Only the brush, balanced, weighted perfectly. You do not use it. You place it near the others, and you whisper, "Thank you," to whoever remembered. That night, you sit by the water. The stars are dim, but the wind is clear. You write, "The things I feared forgetting have begun to remember me." And for once, you sleep without dreaming. Not the silence of absence, nor the hush of reverence, but a different stillness. A pause where the world forgets itself, just for a breath, before slipping into night. You've come to cherish that moment. It's when the temple is between rhythms. The scrolls are put away. The novices have gone to their quarters. Even the statues seem to exhale. It is during that moment you now choose to write. Not what is requested, not what is recorded, but what remains. You begin each dusk with a line. Sometimes only a word, sometimes a phrase. You do not plan them. You do not revise. They come like wind, soft, unexpected, never repeated. You write them on scraps, fragments, shards of unused scrolls, the backs of faded letters, and then you bury them. Not in the ground, in spaces, between stone cracks, under pots, inside unused compartments of the archive shelves. It is not hiding, it is offering. One day, someone may find them, or not, but they are yours, and the dusks. Nebet watches you. She never asks why. She begins to do the same. Her phrases are lighter, hopeful. One reads, The gods laugh, but only when we stop asking questions. You smile, say nothing, but tuck it into your robe. Later, you place it beside your cot. You sleep better that night. The temple prepares for the long night festival, a rare ritual only held once every decade. It marks the moment when the stars shift their position above the river. A sign, they say, that the gods have turned their gaze slightly, not away, but towards something else. The high priests commission a commemorative scroll. You are asked to oversee its creation, not write it, guide it. 3 scribes are chosen, 2 novices, 1 elder. You provide the structure, but the words must be theirs. You watch them struggle. You do not intervene. Only when asked. When they finish the first section, they bring it to you. It is clean, precise, but hollow. You hand it back and say, "Where were you in these words?" They do not understand. Not yet. But they return, rewrite. This time, it breathes. You are asked to speak at the ceremony. Again, you decline. But you write a short piece for the officiant to read. The gods do not move away. They move deeper, into the spaces we forget to look, into the cracks behind our prayers, into the quiet beneath our knowing. The officiant reads it with care, and the crowd, usually loud, festive, falls silent. Then bows. You remain in the back, watching, listening, feeling, perhaps for the first time, that your silence is louder than speech. After the ceremony, a stranger finds you. She wears the garb of a traveler, dusty, simple. Her eyes are older than her face. She holds out a scrap of papyrus, unmarked, except for a symbol, a spiral drawn inward. You recognize it. From a scroll you once restored, lost, then returned anonymously. She says, "That was my brother's." You nod. Hand it back. She closes her hand around yours. "No," she says. "It belongs to those who remembered him." She leaves before you can ask her name. You keep the spiral, add it to your private collection. You grow slower, not weak, just more deliberate. Each gesture, more considered. Each brushstroke, more anchored. You no longer write quickly, but each scroll you finish feels heavier, like it might outlast you. Not from importance, from intention. One afternoon, Nabet asks a question with no warning. "Do you believe the gods read us?" You pause, set your brush down, and answer, "I think they listen to what we don't write." She nods slowly, then adds, "Maybe that's why we must write what we can." You don't speak, but you rise. Open a drawer you haven't touched in years. Inside is your oldest scroll, the one you wrote as a novice. Clumsy, uncertain, but honest. You hand it to her. "Keep it," you say. Until you write something you no longer fear anyone reading. You begin to catalogue your fragments, not for posterity, for peace. You gather the scraps, sort them by tone, by feeling, by silence. One pile reads like longing, another like apology, a third like laughter half forgotten. You bind each with a thin cord. Mark them not with titles, but with symbols. A ripple, a rising sun, a hand reaching toward nothing. You ask the archivist for space in the vault, not in the official shelves. A corner, a ledge, a crack in the wall. He doesn't ask why. He just nods. You place the bundles there. Leave no sign, no key. Only a single line carved lightly into the stone. "Listen here," and walk away. That night, you write again. Not on papyrus, not on clay, but in your mind. You write, "I am not trying to be remembered. I am trying to remember what mattered." And as the dusk falls again, you feel the quiet settle around you, like ink drying, like footsteps fading, like a story still being told. You begin to forget what day it is, not from confusion, from rhythm. The way a song, repeated enough times, loses its edges. The temple days blend, not because they are dull, but because they are whole. A pattern of breath and ink, shadow and oil, silence and small voices that flicker like lamps in the long corridors. And within that rhythm, you move like a note in a scale. Not dominant, not absent, just essential. You rise earlier than usual. The sky still holds stars. You light no lamp. You move by memory, by sound. You prepare your ink with fewer movements now. Not slower, surer. Like the brush and the bowl are simply extensions of the same thought. You no longer test your lines. Your first mark of the day lands without tremor. You write one word. Listen, not as command, as offering. You do not know to whom, only that someone will read it. Now, or much later. The temple welcomes an emissary that morning, a philosopher from a desert monastery. He's robed in a fabric you do not recognize, thin as gauze, but dyed the deepest ochre. His face is lined with thought, not age. He asks to meet with the senior scribe. They bring him to you. He sits, smiles, says, "I have questions that cannot be spoken." You nod, lay out a scroll. He begins to write, not neatly, but honestly. What emerges is not doctrine, not riddle, but memory. Fragments of places he's seen, ideas he's doubted, voices he heard only in dreams. When he finishes, he says, "I have nowhere to store this." You place it in the personal archive. He leaves with nothing, but smiles like someone who has finally put down a burden. That evening, Nabet brings you a scroll, not hers, not yours. Found between two walls during a cleaning, you open it. The first line reads, "For the one who will not be named, but who names everything." You read on. It's a poem. An ode. To the scribe's brush, to the weight of silence, to the pleasure of watching ink bloom across a fresh surface. It is not beautiful in form. It is beautiful in truth. You place it beside your cot. You will not copy it. You will remember it. The next days bring nothing extraordinary, and yet everything feels sharpened. You notice how one novice always whispers the name of each god as they write it. You see how a priest touches the corner of each scroll 3 times before sealing. You begin to write a list of small rituals like these, not for documentation, for continuity, for inheritance. The list grows. Soon it is a scroll of its own. You label it, what cannot be taught, and file it where only the curious will find it. A letter arrives, unmarked, anonymous, but it is written in a style you once knew. A friend, a rival, a memory that still stirs like wind against closed shutters. The letter does not apologize. It does not ask forgiveness. It simply says, "I once read something you wrote and stopped breathing." You do not reply. You do not need to. Some words complete their journey without returning. You are asked to revise a funerary rite, not for a commoner, not for a priest, but for a scroll. A collection of teachings, no longer considered accurate by the temple's doctrine. You are to reformat it, seal it, and store it, not as truth, as history. You do so with care. You do not judge. You do not edit the voice of the dead. You only ensure it remains visible to those willing to read with open eyes. When finished, you add a final line, your own. All teachings speak of the moment they were written. None speak for forever. You sign it with a single mark, not your name, your breath. The wind changes. You feel it in the way the pigeons circle differently, in the way your brush dries faster. The season is shifting. You take out your old personal scrolls. You read them all, one by one. Some lines make you laugh. Some you don't remember writing. A few make you weep quietly, not from sadness, from recognition. You decide to copy none of them. They have lived. They have done their part. You burn them slowly, one at a time, under the stars, whispering each title into the smoke. You keep only one fragment, a single line. May my silence one day become someone else's beginning. You press it into a clay tablet, dry it in the sun, hide it behind a statue's base. No one will find it soon, but one day, maybe. That is enough. Nabet brings you her final scroll. She is leaving, to serve at a temple far to the south. You read her work. It is uneven, but alive. She bows, asks for nothing. You take her scroll, place it in the vault, and say, "One day, someone will read this and wonder who you were. Let that be enough." She smiles and walks away. You sit by the water again. Your breath feels different, lighter. You do not know how many scrolls remain for you, but you know what the next will be. You begin. Here ends the hand that wrote in silence. Then pause. Add. And here begins the silence that writes without hands. You roll it gently, wrap it in gold thread, and store it, not in the archive, in your own heart, where it can live as long as breath does. The morning arrives slowly, not with fanfare, not with thunder or wind, but with stillness, so deep, so complete, that you do not need to open your eyes to know the sun has risen. You feel it in the quiet warmth on your skin, in the shift of air that moves through the temple corridors like a soft hand over stone. You rise without ceremony. You dress with care, though your robes are simple. Your brush is already in your hand, though you do not remember reaching for it. You are not writing today. You are remembering. The day moves in small rhythms. You walk the halls one last time, not to oversee, not to correct, but to witness, to nod at the novices practicing their lines, to pause beside the archivist's chamber where the newest scrolls wait to be copied, to step into the shrine of Thoth, god of writing, wisdom, and quiet rebellion, and bow. No one speaks to you as you pass, not because they are unaware, but because they know. Some things do not need to be said. You return to your quarters near midday. You sit before your scroll table. You do not dip the brush in ink. You only hold it. Let it rest against your fingers. Let it remember. You open a new scroll. Not one prepared by others, one you made yourself, pressed and dried by your own hands weeks ago. You begin to write, not for the temple, not for the priests, not for history, for you. You start with a name, your name, full, clear, with all its titles, its roles, its lineage. Then, beneath it, you write, "This is the record of the one who chose silence over glory." You do not pause. You write, "Who watched more than he was seen, who remembered more than he was told, who carried words like water, not to store, but to pour." You close your eyes. Let memory come, not images, impressions, the scent of ink on a humid morning, the sound of sandals scraping stone before sunrise, the weight of papyrus unrolling beneath your hand, as if sighing into speech, the silence that followed your best lines, the ache of lines you never wrote. You write those too, even now, especially now. You write of the temple, of the years, of the seasons that cycled through your body like tides. You write, "Here I lived as ink lived, spreading, binding, fading, returning." You write of the people, their voices, their griefs, their laughter, the way they asked for the impossible and called it a prayer, the way they forgot your name but remembered your words. You do not resent them. You thank them. You write, "I was not a vessel for truth. I was a mirror for longing." You pause near dusk. Your hands ache, not from effort, from truth. You eat a single fig, drink water, sit again. Your brush dips once more, and you begin your final lines. You write a blessing, not for the gods, not for your soul, for the reader, whoever they are. Whenever they find this scroll, you write, "If your eyes touch these lines, let them soften. If your breath slows, let it stay. If your thoughts wander, follow them. There is no command here, only a door." Then, the final inscription, an offering, a wish, a release. Let this ink remain, not because it is sacred. Let it remain because someone, once, needed to say something before disappearing. You blot the scroll, roll it slowly, wrap it in white linen, seal it with a mark that no one else has ever seen. Not your glyph, your essence. A curve of breath, a line of dusk, a point of return. You place it not in the archive, not in the temple. You walk outside, into the night, and bury it in the sand at the edge of the river, where water once touched earth, where earth still remembers. You return to your room, lie on your mat. You close your eyes, you do not dream, you remember. One last time. The next morning, your chamber is empty, except for the scrolls you helped write, the shelves you left organized, the brush you set down, still stained with ink. No one finds your body, but they find your words. Hundreds of them, thousands, each one still breathing, each one a doorway. And in the last scrap left on your table, a single line remains. The story does not end. It continues in the hand that writes next.